One of the great things about being an architect is that you give a gift of a building like this. It's open to the public all the time. And it keeps giving you back your whole life. You don't have to create so many. It's about that building brings a spiritual space to a lot of people. You know, I grew up in Manchester, Washington, a small town. We'd go to the beach all the time, and we still have the cabin in front of where my parents' house, the first house I ever built, that was built in 1975. And there's a cabin there. And there are rowboats that we use, right? And in a rowboat, the bow is here, and you sit in the middle, and you pull the oars like that, right? So you're pulling, and the boat is going this way. So you never can see where you're going. And in my first drawings for the Sokolov House and the Bronx Gymnasium Bridge, there's picture of this rowboat guy. So Andrew McNair, and I said, Andrew says to me, well, what's that about? I said, oh, that's me, growing up, rowing in Manchester, Washington. You can never actually see where you're going. You can only see where you've been. That has to go all the way back to Bremerton, Washington, when I was like seven years old with my brother. We're making clubhouses in the backyard at 2021 13th Street. It's a crummy little town, hard scrabble town, no architects in that town, only 30,000 people. So, but I loved to make things, and we were making a game we called Property. Little roads and little buildings, and then we began to build clubhouses. And at one point we had a two-story tree house, and we had another kind of clubhouse that had a kind of balcony in it, and then we had an underground clubhouse where we dug a hole and we put logs and a rug and then put dirt on top of it. And it's funny because when I began to teach at Columbia University the first year, I took over the first year program, I think it was 1986, with Kenneth Frampton. And I rewrote the first, and I said there are four kinds of architecture: under the ground, in the ground, on the ground, and over the ground. And just a few years ago, it started to occur to me that I was doing that at 7 years old, so maybe it was a kind of, I never thought that I would do anything else. It's not like I decided. When we submitted the Kiasma Museum, it was 1993. I had moved the office to a space like this, too big for me, too expensive, and a couple of projects that we thought we were going to get, we didn't get. So I had reduced the office to 2 people or 3 people or whatever. I hadn't paid the rent in 4 months. I maxed out my credit cards. We were broke. I went to teach at the Berlage Institute, and I said to Herman Hertzberger, I said, Herman, you got to give me 2 classes because one class is only $3,000. I need $6,000 to pay my rent, and that's for 1 month. And I got a phone call from New York. Well, we found out about the Helsinki competition. You want to hear the news? You want to hear the good news first or the bad news? I said, give me the bad news first. They said, the $26,000 that they promised us because of the devaluation of the Finmark is only going to be $18,000. I said, well, what's the good news? The good news is we won the competition. And that was a turning point of my office. Because that competition, then after that I had 4 people, 5 people, and we built the building, opened in '98. Without winning that competition, I might just be a teacher that did a couple dress shops in New York. That'd be it. It was a transformative moment, for sure.
Luckily enough.
Yeah. I think luck is part of it. It's not although, you know, there were 417 entries and we won it. So it was a good design. But luck is part of it too. I mean, the competition, you know, we've done over 150 competitions. And maybe we won 1 in 25. And then the problem is, some of those times, they never get built. Like in Mumbai or Qingdao or Berlin, the one I won in Berlin in 1989. So it's hard enough to win, and then you can win and it doesn't get built. So you have to be very lucky that it gets built, you know, in order to make that leap. I'm working with an idea that drives the design, a central concept that holds all the manifold parts and pieces together. And that's not easy to come by. Sometimes it takes weeks. Sometimes you can get the idea right away. And then that central concept relates to the site, to the program, to all the spaces, and makes the building unique. I mean, I just came back from the Chapel of St. Ignatius, you know, and there was a drawing, you know, 7 bottles of light in a stone box. And it was about St. Ignatius, about the religious experience in space. And the building's 20 years old, and it's really beautiful. But the concept drawing gives an order to the process. And then everybody buys into it, and we all work to try to get that concept to happen. Another thing that happens when you have something as clear as 7 bottles of light in a stone box, when people try to take things out, sometimes the client will stand in and say, wait a minute. So there was a physical planning director who said, oh, it's over budget, we're going to take 3 of the bottles out. And then the campus ministry stepped in and said, wait a minute, you can't take some of the bottles of light out. There are 7 days, there are 7 bottles of light in Steven's concept. You can't change that. And so we shrunk the building footprint a little bit, but we kept the concept, and that's, you know, I mean, that's how I've been working ever since I started, that there should be a meaningful concept that drives the design. I don't believe that intellectual, there's an intellectual idea, but I don't believe that's the most important part. The most important part is the experience. And I wrote a text called Questions of Perception, a Phenomenology of Architecture in 1993. It's still a valid book for me. It speaks about the actual experience of the body moving through space, seeing the light, the color, the tactility, the smell, the sound. That's the meaning that's visceral, that anybody can get, a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, whatever. I still get emails from people who visit the chapel that are very moved by the light and the space. You know, I mean, I think one of the great things about being an architect is that you give a gift of a building like this. It's open to the public all the time. The center of this campus, and that's 20 years ago, and it keeps giving you back your whole life. So, you know, in fact, you don't have to create so many. It's about that building brings a spiritual space to a lot of people, and it will continue. It's in perfect condition. Maybe it's going to last, I don't know how many years. It's the center of the campus. So I think architecture is a form of art, and that message is conveyed by this work, if you can leave it in a way. And I think that continues. You know, I get, every once in a while, I get some emails from MIT at our Simmons Hall dormitory. Somebody, you know, wrote a piece of music, Oh Spongy Sponge. They wrote an opera about the sponge building. It's humorous, but the students, they get it. You know, that's a special piece of architecture. So, yeah, no, I think that's exciting. That's one of the greatest honors of being an architect, if you can leave a good building that carries on the message. If you want to find the intellectual meaning, the idea that drives the design, that's up to you. But it's got to work at the phenomenological level to be a success. So I'm not a conceptual artist that way. You know, there's a movement of conceptual art that the idea is enough. To me, it's a force that holds the meaning, but the real test is in the space and the light and the material. So my heroes are people that cared deeply about that, like Carlos Scarpa, you know, or Sigurd Leverance, or Louis Kahn, Adolf Loos, or Le Corbusier. You go and visit any building by Le Corbusier, you see the detail means something. I know the whole story because Jose Uberi, who's still alive, great friend of mine, was working on the working drawing. He was doing the drawings in the studio. And there were only 6 people in his studio. So I think today what's wrong with architecture is it became too corporate. You know, the idea that you have to have 250 people or 300 people or whatever, that's not a value about architecture. That's a business value. It's a corporate value. And that's what's kind of gone wrong with architecture, because you cannot be working with 300 people and be passionate about how the joints come together and the details. Too many mouths to feed, you know? So I think this is a sad moment in architecture, because there are only a few firms that are working with the kind of idealism. I was just with Alvaro Siza last July in Porto, and I said, Alvaro, how many people in this studio? 9. 9. Fantastic. You know what, Zaha was a very close friend of mine. She came to our apartment about 2 weeks before she died. She wasn't even sick. She brought my daughter, I have a 3-year-old daughter, a little Issey Miyake dress. And she said to me, I just wish I could go away with 5 people and have my own, you know, do my own thing. She didn't like that big office. In a way, that might be what killed her. It was just too much. The burden of all the, you know, all the forces that are at play. So I think architecture, it comes down to, it comes down to the detail, to the material, to the light, to the space, to the phenomena of the experience. It's not about the size of the building or the size of the firm.
Hi, I'm Carolina.
So my name is Magdalena.
I'm an assistant project architect.
I assist the lead architect, and I take great responsibility for managing a lot of the work.
I've been at Steven Holl for about 4 years now.
And I've been working for Steven Holl Architects for the past 6.5 years.
And I'm working on the Franklin and Marshall College project in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
I've been working on the expansion of the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts in Washington, D.C. for the past 5, and we're opening the project in 2 months. So that's a big milestone, and it's a wonderful project. So I started working for Steven Holl Architects shortly after graduating from the Graduate School of Design at Harvard. So this, in a way, has been my first job, which has been a really challenging but also a wonderful place to work.
I always wanted to work here when I was in school. I always read Steven's books and his watercolors, and kind of really inspired by the way he plays with light, and no space is the same. You know, all other architects, maybe their architecture looks the same, and here every building is unique to the conditions of the project and, you know, the story behind it and the site. So I find that really compelling to work, and you learn with every project you work on. Parallax. I love Parallax. I read that my last year in college, and it really inspired my thesis. Yeah, how he talks about time and space and light. That's my favorite.
It's an inspiring place to work. I think as a young designer that is looking for a substantial opportunity to grow as an architect, and to realize who they are as an architect, I think it's a beautiful place to start your career at, and to build a substantial part of your portfolio.
And yeah, I mean, Steven was my idol in school, so here I am. I'm very, very happy.
It's not really 2 offices. It's 1 office. You know, like I'm making on these watercolor pads the drawing for the building, okay? And there's a carrying out office in Beijing, 10 people, and there's all this here, but I don't see it as two offices because, first of all, right now we have such great Skypes that I don't have to go there all the time. When we first started, I had to travel to China more often. Now I can we just had a three-way Skype this morning, Shenzhen, Beijing, New York. It lasted 2 hours, saved me a trip, client's happy. So I found in China great clients who wanted to build exactly what I imagined and without changing anything. Arata Izusaki appointed a museum, Nanjing Museum, Xifang Museum, which is just had an exhibition of my work, and I was just there again in March, and that was my first project in China. And when I was on site, we got this message to go to Beijing to do 8 towers, and I thought, this is crazy. What's this about? And I told them to send us a ticket, and then we flew on their ticket. They picked us up in a limo, took us, and they wanted us to do a facade on this zoning envelope of these 8 towers. And I said, I'm not interested, but I will make a vision for you. And this was right before the Beijing Olympics. So I said, give me, 3 months and, so many dollars, and I'll make a vision, a real vision for this project. It's 8 towers. They wanted to save some industrial thing in the middle, which was not worth saving. And then we really made a vision. And I thought, I don't care, whether they ever build this. I want to make something about, all geothermally heated and cooled. The towers are connected by bridges with programs. There's a big water garden, a cinema floating in it, the whole thing. And so we presented to them, and there was silence. I thought it's over, they're never going to do this. I didn't do what they asked me to. And then we got an email from them. Your vision greatly exceeds our budget. However, we're raising our budget to build your vision. Don't take anything out, which was amazing. That's China. I opened an office only to build that project. That was the only reason, to make sure the details are good. I didn't try to get work. I wasn't going out after work. In Fukuoka, I was invited, to make a 30-unit apartment building. And I was very nervous because I'd never worked in Asia before. It was kind of a frightening proposition. How do you control what's going to happen? So I wanted to expose this right from the beginning. I said, I want to expose the structure somehow and make that so they can't take that away or change it. So I was thinking of creating like Zen-like space between the apartments and have water gardens that would reflect sunlight back up into the interiors. And then I thought, it's Japan. What can we do? And instead of soji screens and fusumi, instead of those sliding walls, pivoting walls. So I said hinged space. The idea that, you can see that's a little bit of that. I'm still carrying on that idea of big walls that pivot and change the spaces. And there are 30 apartments in that building, and they're all different because of the hinged space. And you can reconfigure, you can actually erase a bedroom by moving 2 walls, open it up, or make a bedroom. It was a very successful idea. The building is, super successful, and nowadays it's occupied mostly by interior designers and architects that, bought the spaces over the years, resold them and bought them or whatever. And I think those 2 ideas were the couple of ideas that that gave the direction of that design. I haven't been back. I want to go back there and visit that particular building again, because it's like one of the first major buildings, 1992. Maggie's Cancer Care Center in London. I'm very proud of that building. Music is a kind of healing condition for people with terminal cancer. And so I thought, let's connect to that early music that's of that old St. Bart's Cathedral, where they had music that was shape notes written by monks before musical notation. It dates from the 12th century. So then I began to think about that, and then I thought, how can I bring that to bear? And then we had this idea of a musical staff that wraps the building, and then these colored pieces of what I call shape notes are in this new material called Okalux, where we developed with the company in Germany a kind of new kind of stained glass, really. It's a colored, a UV protected color film between two layers of super insulated ecological material in this glass sandwich. And it's a beautiful thing. It's like a Mark Rothko, kind of watercolor, kind of blurry color. And it lights up at night and glows out. And then during the day, it's very subdued. But when you're inside, the glow is on the inside. And then there was, how do you put this idea together? And so that we had the idea that the structure would be like a hand. The beginning of the staff is basically 5 lines, like the hand. And that structure would be exposed in concrete. And then inside of that would be a bamboo basket, a kind of comforting, natural bamboo with no varnish on it, just natural bamboo. And that was there's one drawing that shows these 3 things coming together to form the central idea. Every project is different, I mean, the one that we just won in Ostrava for the concert hall was the perfect acoustic instrument in its case. And there's an old building, the House of Culture, and you were to add a 1,300 seat concert hall to this. And I got up one morning and I made a single sketch that we won't touch the old building, we'll jump over it. Because this is the side of the promenade, but it's noisy. That's the side of the park. That's where we should be putting the concert hall, where it's quiet and you can have a view to the park. So I said, don't touch the old hall, just have an escalator that goes up and then jump over it. And my wife, Demetra, said, I made the sketch. I always work in the morning on my watercolors from like 6 o'clock until, sort of 8:30. I brought, to breakfast, I brought this sketch, and she said, it's a winning idea. And we never budged from that, and we won. And we just found out we won on the 4th of July. So I'm very excited about that, because we teach a class called The Architectonics of Music. So I'm always interested that there's an analogy between music and architecture. So as we develop this, I want to work on the interior of the hall in relation to Leos Janacek's great musical concepts, somehow to have this development of this 1,300 seat hall reflect some of his thoughts in music. Someone says, what do you want to do? If you could just choose anything? I always thought I would like to do a concert hall. So this is a great moment in these competitions. I love to paint. I would, I make paintings, just pure watercolor paintings, just for the sake of making paintings. I think I could have been a painter. There's something really beautiful about sitting down with a white sheet of paper and beginning to work, not quite knowing what you're going to make, and having something that you really get excited about. I actually just had that feeling this morning. I got up, the air conditioning is not working in our apartment, so I was kind of cranky, I was sweating. It was like 6 o'clock. I'm working on this astrophysics building in Toronto. I'm kind of angry because the site is too small. So I just said, I gotta draw something. And I began to draw this thing. And I said, oh yeah. And I started to have, I looked up astrophysics, and I was learning that all stellar movement is characterized by curvilinear, and anyway, I shocked myself into being excited about what I was making. So that's a very difficult thing to explain, but that's why I love to paint every day. I never miss a day without one or two paintings that I make. And in the summertime, many more than that. So there's over like 30,000. I have an archive with, all these paintings and drawings. Every building that I ever made has a series of watercolors that go first before the building. I teach. I've been a professor for over 25 years at Columbia University, so my writing is also something I share with my students, and it's a way for me to raise the bar as high as I can raise it, for myself, like a challenge. Anchoring, 1989, 30 years. It's been important for me because I can say what I'm intending in an overall way, yeah, it's a challenge that I gave myself, and they're not published. There's 3,000 copies. That's it. It's not like I'm trying to get work from it or something like that. Not at all. No, it's about trying to, decide what it is you're really trying to aim at. What are the core aims? And as you develop over the years, I've found they don't. All the things that I said in anchoring, I still believe in. But then there are other levels of thinking that you can develop further. And also you have other work, so you need to speak to the other work. We're publishing the 5th in that series, Anchoring, Intertwining, The House, Urbanisms, and this is called Compression. And I wrote a text called Architecture Activating the Brain because I was giving a lecture at the Salk Institute about neuroscience and architecture, and I was interested in these connections, and it's some new thinking, and I was going to publish it just like a little pamphlet by itself. A couple of professors came up and said, no, you must put it together with your projects because you're the only one that's doing the theoretical and building the projects. You have to keep these things together. So then instead of Architecture Activating the Brain, I titled this book Compression. And it's going to come out, and it's in that same series. Well, I think we are already maxed out on the digital. The problem with the digital is it's too literal. So you can have something that has no idea and basically no structure, no interior space, and you can make an image that looks like it's built and place people in front of it and whatever. You can make a drawing so realistic that this is a danger in architecture because a developer can say, okay, I want you to do it, and then there's no substance there. And I think that dimension is problematic. I think there needs to be an educational dimension whenever a building is built, that the people that have the power to build the building have to look deeper than a digital rendering. So yeah, that's we always build models. We make models of our spaces, and then we photograph the interiors of the models to get the light to work properly. James Turrell told me once, he said, the reason that these computer drawings don't work for interior light is natural light falls off a surface at the square root of the distance of the source. And that you can't do in a computer. You have to make a model to make that light be the true light. And I've always made models of the spaces and testing the light. So when we're working on a project, to me, natural light is really important because it's the life of an interior. And so we don't trust the computer model for that. It's completely, the field of architecture is completely changed because of the digital world, and as is communication, as is the publishing industry. Thank God you still have a magazine, because I don't like reading things online. I mean, I have to read them online, but I don't like looking, and I won't mention those 3 websites that dominate the whole architecture world now. It's not thorough enough, it's not deep enough, and the images stay up there for about one day and then they disappear. I mean, there's a superficiality that's added to the speed, which is not very, I think it's not very good for thought. Architecture should be raised to the level of thought. But that's the world that we're living in, and we have to deal with it. Students of architecture should go and visit. This is not my message. This is a message that I think many professors, my great professor Herman Punt would leave the same message. 2 things. Go and visit the buildings. Physically visit them. That's when they speak to you. And the second message is the interior ought to be more than what the building looks like from the outside. And I can tell you, in the work of Le Corbusier or Kahn or Adolf Loos, the interior experience is always more than what it looks like on the outside. But in most of the famous architects practicing today, it's the reverse. And I always put that up as a challenge to myself too, that the interior experience must give you more than what this building gives you from the outside. Jeff Kipnis was very keen on the Chapel of St. Ignatius. He says, it's very homely and quite not very good looking from the outside, but the inside, that's fantastic. And he's a critic. So that I achieved it, and I think that's a goal, I think, that I would say would be valid forever.